Very good.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much to Nathalie, who's going to give us a fascinating sounding talk. And over to you, Nathalie.
I hope so. I hope it will be fascinating. Thank you, everyone, for being there. I'm just going to share my screen. Let's go. And here it is. So I don't know if anybody spotted the reference, but that's another debate of the title. Right. So the content is a bit different from the teaser you had received, but this is what we're going to talk about today. And I hope this will make sense. And obviously, please feel free to ask any question at the end. So a few words about myself and really why and how I discovered the Insights communities. I worked for 20 years, client side, inside, notably establishing the Insights Europe for Disney video games, marketing client side, and then again, research and marketing agency side. And then along these years, I worked in supporting businesses, in managing platforms, because on top of my Insights role, it happened I was also managing a multimedia sales tool that's in the late 90s, embedded in laptops. Then at Disney, I managed the redesign of the 4-country websites, the CRM implementation. And then in 2010, that's another thing, I joined CSpace, which is the leader in Insights communities, and really discovered this methodology. And I was really wowed by this methodology. So that's why when I left them in 2011, I created my activity on the back of a proprietary community platform. So we offer the platform, but also separately community services of all kinds. We also offer online and face-to-face research with a focus on qual in France. And since 2012, with that proprietary platform, I recruited participants as a demo participants. But since 2012, some of them are still in there, and I'm going to show you some screenshots of some interactions I have with them. And it's become a full-fledged activity. And we are about to publish a new update on consumer relationship with tech, focusing on smartphones usage for 2023. So this is something that has been really key for me, and I hope I can convey that in that presentation, why I think communities are so important and so helpful. Here you've got a few brands, there are big brands, but I also have been working with smaller brands on community projects. So let me just, before we start, show you a statistic that you can get from Mesomark, Global Market Research 2023. So qual research, 16% of the global research spend. And here on the right, online communities, 3% of this total global qual research. Face-to-face groups nowadays, 3%, and IDIs at 2%. So basically the traditional qual that was about 6%, face-to-face groups were about 6% before the pandemic. Now they're down to 3%, and probably you're not surprised. And the whole of face-to-face is about 6%. You add to that some other methodologies, and something that has exploded is online mobile qual, the Zoom and the likes, which is now at 6%. So enough for the data. I guess you're here to have some tips, and I'm going to give you some hopefully interesting and useful. So why did I call that the rules of engagement? It's because engagement is really a key way of approaching, a key way of approaching any community activity. And that's why it can be really different from your traditional research. So here, this picture, I'll start with the picture, the reminder of that 2015 publicity around the fact that apparently the average attention span of humans online was 8.5 seconds, which was less than 9 seconds for a goldfish. Apparently, this has been debunked since, and it's only one website, one data somewhere which say that. we as humans are probably able to have an attention span online of over 9 seconds, hopefully, but still it's very different from when you talk to someone face to face, and especially when you have something which is displayed on the screen, you really have to be very careful about how you display it, and that's why I mentioned here it's important that your participants understand at first glance. So you have to keep it short, you have to bring the topic to light, and a good tip for your questions is to keep them down to 3 key points. That's somehow a rule that you can stick to make sure your questions are very clear to your participants. So research design is the first thing for this engagement. Now, interactions, they are also really critical. So you provide feedback when you can. That's not always possible, obviously, but if you can, it's really great because people feel they're listened to. You also engage in a dialogue. Here, I'm showing a screenshot of a recent discussion with Steve A., who is a long-standing member of my tech enthusiast community. And the discussion was about which are your TV shows or movies you're going to at the moment. And he said he was talking of Oppenheimer, the fact it was the only film he had seen in cinemas. And it happened to be the same for me. And that's why when I probed him on his comment, I said, well, it happened to me the same. Well, in my case, I liked it, but so that's a core example, I think, of how you can engage with that first perspective that you probably wouldn't have in an IDI or very remotely, and probably wouldn't have in a focus group, even less so in a focus group. So you're more on the listening side, while in the classic or traditional research, while in communities, it can be a good thing to be there as a person, because really what you want to do is bring that to life, that people feel they have a human on the other side, that it's not some unreal person, an unreal thing. That really increases their interest and their involvement in what you call, again, engagement. Did I mention that? I think I did. So that's a key thing to remember. Talking about your participants' favorite topics. All right, your research topic might not be fun. It might be very serious. You might talk of many varied things, but there are always moments where you can talk about things that are perhaps also on a lighter mode, talking about family, talking about pets, anything, everything, hobbies. That increases, again, the interest of participants for what you're going to talk to them about later on. So that can be in the warm-up phase on your very first day, for example, and you can have such discussions. So there was a case where I developed the activity guide for a community which was for kitchen appliances. That was the only part of the community I was involved. And for the first day, I had activities on the warm-up activities about people talking about their home. I asked them what they were proud of in their home, what was the room they were the most proud of, if they could post pictures, if they do DIY. And then the second activity would be about the kitchen, the space. And again, there were things they were really proud of. So really have people opening up with their life and things they care for, which can really help guiding them then into your research topic. And increases the interest, because the interest for the topic and for whatever you say will keep the engagement high. Now, here's another example, and that's again from my tech enthusiast community, or where we talked of something completely different. That was, do you do gardening? There was a second point, which was, do you do DIY? And I encouraged them to post pictures of their creations. And one member posted that brilliant homemade chicken run. So it's a bit of in the garden and DIY at the same time. And I think this is when people, you have them talk about what matters to them aside from the research. That can be an example. So we're talking here of a long-term community where you really need to revive engagement and interest of people from time to time. So having such kind of activity will help reviving their interest instead of talking only about streaming websites or video or whatever, or your smartphone or etc. So it relates to people's lives, and that's how it can gather more interest. As well, gamification. You might have listened to Betty Adamou, brilliant webinar recently, where she was talking about gamification, but more for online surveys. So it's a little bit what I try to do and what we can try to do with communities. So they're being fun and creative. You've just seen the example of the gardening. I think that's one. Use methods like pond system in our own tech enthusiast communities. The participants are rewarded as soon as they reach 100 points. They get a voucher. We can do quizzes or quick polls, card sorting exercise that some platforms allow you to do. All sorts of ideas that make it a bit more interactive than just the discussion or the usual discussion. So to understand that really a community is not only translating a discussion guide into activities that are online, it's going one step beyond. Photos and videos, they are really great to bring your project to life, you know that. But beware with videos, you have to treat them to make sure that it adds time to your moderating or your freelancers if you hire people. So you have to input this into the moderation time to limit the duration and number of videos. Have clear instructions for your participants, typically 1 minute max. And really, I put 2 to 5. I think 5 is a real max for a community that is more a classic community, discussion based. If you go into more than 5 videos, it might be that you want to approach it a different way. You want to do mobile ethnography. That's a different kind of platform, different kind of approach, different design. So keep that in mind when you ask participants to post videos. And it's called a community for a reason. You build that community feel, and this is what matters really for your participants and for yourself. So I think this is clear, all sorts of very varied ways to activate, to develop engagement of participants. Now, what I'd like to talk about now is how you can maximize your output quality, several ways. So firstly, draw on your recruiter support. First in the quality of the recruitment, obviously, but also once you have your participants in, give them access to your participation stats, engagement stats. You have some platforms, normally they should provide recruiter access, so the recruiter only sees how much each participant has taken part, and they don't see the details of the research. And then they can help you chasing your inactive or unengaged participants. And the planning is also really critical. Like for any other project, just like a live group, treat it with a clear project timeline. It includes materials delivery schedule, and that's really important. And that's where it can go wrong. And I'll give you an example. So don't forget in your project timeline to build in time for all approval loops for the agency, for the end client. And that can be where it can go wrong, really, if you're not well aligned on that. That's why it has to be communicated to your client initially. You build in time for translations. Think about minimum of 2 working days for traditional translation agencies, and more if you really have a lot of content. That's also really important to have in mind. And even if, like me, for example, when I receive materials like discussion guides in English, I translate them myself in French if I have the time, or I can use a translator if I don't have the time. But this is time that I will spend. So, you know, I'm not planning to work nights for the project because I've been sent the elements or the materials very late. So for everybody's time, it's important to build that into your project timeline. So keep that in mind. And I'm adding here a tip: avoid starting a short-term community on a Friday. So there's an example where we had we were planning to launch the community on Thursday morning. I think it was because of stimuli that were very sophisticated stimuli. We weren't ready on the Thursday. So we launched on a Friday morning. Okay, launch at 10 a.m. It's asynchronous. So people will come in when they come in. They come in at lunchtime because they have a bit of time. They come in the afternoon. They often come in the evening. So it comes 5, 6 p.m. and you realize you have only 2/3 of your participants. And guess what? The recruiter's gone home because it's Friday and they're not going to be there until Monday. So I ended up, it was a bit of a lonely moment out there, sending emails because I didn't have most of their mobile numbers, sending emails to these missing participants, probably ending nowhere, these emails, because of the spam filters. On the Monday morning, the recruiter is back, and in 2 hours, this is sorted and they're all in. So, have that in mind and don't get stuck with this kind of scheduling elements. So if you plan ahead carefully, you're more likely to get a successful project launch. And that's it really on these tips. Now, I just wanted to add on the benefits of a community, and I hope I've conveyed this. And I think it deserves to make more than 3% of global research spend, but that's my personal opinion, and I share it with myself because of the flexibility it offers, the geographic cover. I mentioned large international communities at C-Space. I've managed communities of about 800 members across 10 countries. And within 2 days, we would get in the responses of 200 participants. I wasn't managing them on my own. You need to be 2, and you're probably not probing everybody. But this gives you an idea of what you can get. Obviously, the communities I manage nowadays are much smaller scale, but always getting, the benefit of the large geographic coverage. That you could argue you have the same with the Zoom, but the conditions are very different. There's the huge benefit, I think, of the anonymity of participants. So an example of a community where participants discussed quitting smoking. There was a lot of passionate exchanges about this very sensitive topic. They all had that in common in that group, and that created a lot of glue and very interesting interactions. They loved it, and the 2 moderators who were managing this community, we loved it as well. It was really fun, really interesting, and very, very insightful as well for us. So the point is really, the more your participants are engaged, the more insightful comments you're likely to get. The other example of the community of gamers that was on the anonymity of participants was we had a discussion where one mentioned downloading pirated materials. Perhaps this participant wouldn't have said the same had he known that another participant in that 10 people discussion group was a police chief. So I think that's something that I see there is a question. We're gonna handle that later. So yeah, anonymity of participants, and the last 2 points really, the freedom of asynchronous. So I'd say it's the freedom for you, either a moderator or a project manager, because you relieve yourself of the stress of a live event. And also for the participants, think about when you have participants who are very busy, that when they log in at a moment which is suitable for them in their busy schedule, and you're more likely to get their minds focused on what they're saying, and it can, again, improve the quality of the output. And to finish off, I really believe in mid and long-term communities, which are, I think, an iterative methodology for innovating. very useful, or exploring usage and journeys. So thank you very much for your attention. Please get in touch to see how we can support you in your upcoming community projects. You have my email. You also have our LinkedIn page. We're going to publish that smartphone usage update soon. This is December. Really, I've been talking about that for 2 months, but I swear I'm going to do it. So if you're interested, please follow us, and I'm ready to answer all your questions.
Thank you so much, Nathalie. We've got one question on here from Sean. How do you handle more complex and descriptive, projective and enabling techniques in communities? And just to say, if the rest of you would like to unmute yourselves and contribute to the discussion, please do.
That's an interesting one, Shan. Yeah, the way of handling it will be to perhaps divide the work in several bits. You start involving people, and again, you create engagement, and then projective, indeed. You do your discussions. You can show visuals, and this is really something that can be very useful in projective techniques. So you show the visuals to have people interact based on that. And what I like to do is a mix. So you have the mix of the discussions, maybe a quick questionnaire, and then you go back to your topic with several angles. But it's a very vague answer. I would probably better answer if you give me a very specific topic. But yeah, this can be a way of handling it. I don't know if that helps, Shan.
It just like if you're trying to ask participants to think about stuff in an unusual way, which is projective techniques, because you don't have the warmth of the person explaining what you'd like them to do. Whenever I've used them, some of them like fall flat on their faces, and people literally just put, I don't know what to say. That feels really, because they haven't seen me explaining this is an unusual way of asking. It just helps us understand how you look at this area in a different way and have a bit of fun with it, be a bit creative with it. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. It might be asking somebody to describe the sensation of a razor on their skin, or the sensation of eating a sweet, and I just don't want to hear just like chewy and smooth and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
That's very interesting, because I was faced with such cases, and yeah, you have your discussions. I think it's also down to preparing participants to go into that. So obviously this is not something you would do first. And also, when I've had to use projective techniques, it was not necessarily in short-term communities. It was in longer-term communities, maybe, mid-term. So people were sort of used of the way of thinking, and they were not completely fresh and new. And that's probably why you might have encountered issues in a short-term community. It's very like a bit abrupt into getting them into doing
because
that.
They're only on it for 5 to 6 days, and then it's over. That's an interesting point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Nathalie, Rebecca's got a question for you. I'm interested in any tips on how to manage moderation between multiple moderators.
Yeah.
I've been running a year-long community on my own. It's been great, and the client is considering expanding it next year. If that happens, I will need to get some help, as it's almost a full-time job on its own. But I'm concerned that I will lose my closeness with the participants, start duplicating probes, etc. Thanks.
That's interesting, Rebecca. Yeah, because I happen to have that with my own tech enthusiast community. And I have other community managers who come in, and I always fear having that. I think it's also down to you training properly your freelancers or your other moderators. So being on their side, for example, moderating with them a couple discussions, and interacting the two of you, and then you can be there and you can give them advice, and then afterwards leaving them like a training, like a new staff member, and then leaving them on their own more and more. could be a way to handle that. That's an idea that comes to mind. But if you want to have someone hand over to someone else, but I understand the feeling and I know what you feel. If you feel that you need to have other moderators, and do like that, I'd say do some kind of training, and you can still be there. And that's what I say to people: I'm still there. I'm gonna keep an eye. You have an issue with that, or ask me what you think. You should ask. Sometimes at the start, really like you would do with a new employee. That would be my suggestion. But anyway, good luck to you.
Thank you.
If you do that. You're welcome.
Forgive me for not being on camera. I've broken my camera, but thank you.
Lucas says online respondents during live interviews quite often tend to speak about irrelevant topics. Is this less the case when using online communities?
You might be happy for them to speak of non-relevant topics. You want them to open up. So actually, this is probably not so much an issue, I'd say. Yes.
What I mean, actually, Nathalie, is that I usually have quite tight discussion guides, and I need them to focus on several topics, right? And because they like to talk, sometimes they go off and they speak about not relevant things. So I was just thinking, since this is in writing and maybe you can direct it more, like I need you to speak about this and this.
Yeah.
They not just talk with you about have you
The weather.
too much of, oh yeah, exactly. I mean, not the weather, but it's kind of quite bizarre. At times you have to stop them.
I know, and this is probably.
I don't know if this is less the case with asynchronous, with online communities, which are asynchronous.
You have less the pressure of time constraints that you have in something that is live, and that's why in a live interview or in a live group you have to refocus the group on the topic, because you have your 2 hours, and you look at your Steam and you're thinking, oh my God, if you start going into that, we're not going to have the time to show the Steam, and the client is there watching. So let's focus again on the topic. But in a asynchronous community, there's more freedom. That's why I mentioned freedom. If they want to open up about something else, they can, as long as it's not unlawful, or there are topics that come up, and I've seen that since my very first days in communities. It was I remember a sea space community that was really early days for me, and people were talking about very personal things, and they wanted to open up. That means they're feeling comfortable, and actually that's a bonus. In that case, that's a bonus, as long as at some point they come back to the topic, because you can just, it's a digression. They have been able to feel more involved, and I think that's a good thing.
Merci.
Just one point, does that assume that everybody on the community is following everybody's responses?
Yes, we're talking of, yes, and you can have your private discussions if you want, but I'm more talking of forum discussions with group discussions.
Okay. I haven't done those.
All right. But asynchronous?
Yes.
You haven't?
Not where participants can read what other participants have.
Okay. This is mostly what I do in communities, actually.
So they can see, you can have private conversations and also group conversations.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And the forum discussions, I mentioned that example of the people discussing about quitting smoking. This was really emotional for them. And you could read that, you didn't talk to them face to face. You didn't see their faces, but you could see with the content of the comments that it was a key topic, and they were really happy to exchange with others on that. This wasn't the topic of the community, though it was somehow related, but they talked about this. It was one of the questions at the start, and that's really where they opened up a lot. So yeah, this is a real bonus if you have a topic where you can have people observe others and respond onto other comments, other people's comments.
They're self-moderating themselves.
Sorry?
They're self-moderating.
Yeah. But the thing is, obviously, if you're for some parts, you can have a community where you have mostly based on forum discussions, and then you'll have one-on-ones for some things like blog type, when you don't want them to see other because it's more sensitive, or you have more things that are more private. You're going to talk about money or other else or anything, and then it can be more difficult for people, even with the anonymity. They wouldn't want to have others reading that.
Could I ask a quick, very basic question, which is just how long a process would this be? How long would a project last, and how much interaction would you get from participants? Would you expect them to be multiple times per day, or just once, or how would that work?
So that's varied. You'd have your typical short-term project would be 3 to 5 days, with perhaps 20 to 30 minutes a day. You call that your day task. You'd have two to three tasks to do each day, and you have timed it initially with your recruiter. You said, okay, we'll have participants 5 days, 30 minutes every day, and the amount of involvement is clearly defined at the start. And yes, it can be in all at once. It can be in 2-3 chunks, and people can decide as well. And this is what is nice with the asynchronous, that they can decide to start it and then come back when they have more time to finish off for that day activity. And then that's the typical short term, and then you have longer term where you really pace it the way you want.
Kirsty asks, are there any particular platforms you would recommend, both for online communities and mobile communities?
So, Kirsty, maybe you're thinking of mobile communities. Are you thinking of those with the videos, or is it so for mobile ethnography? There's Indemo, which is great. You have Field Notes, so there are 2 really nice platforms I've worked on. For more traditional, you have Qualzy, and you have Inkling, that are names that come to mind. I'm mentioning recent experiences which are very satisfactory, though, both from a platform perspective and also from service after sales. Services also can be really important. Recollective, another one. These are examples of leading platforms that I've used in the past few years. And there's mine, obviously.
Thank you.
Which I'm happy to demo anytime.
Yeah, I've used Indemo myself, but
yeah.
not any of the others. So I wondered whether there was any standout ones.
So really, Field Notes for your mobile ethnography is a really good one as well. And the 3 others I've mentioned, really, Inkling, Qualzy, I think are really good. They offer reasonable cost and a lot of functionalities.
Great, thank you.
And I think that Lucy would probably sack me if I didn't remind you all that some of those companies will give ICG advertisers and give discounts. So do go through that method. Can I ask a couple of questions as a recruiter? So I don't think I've ever been given access to any participation stats ever to enable me to give them a hurry up. And I'm not sure that other recruiters have either. So how common do you think that is?
Well, I've sometimes helped on recruitment management on platforms, and I was given access to what we call the recruiter access. It was on Qualzy, formerly I can't remember, but now they're called Qualzy. And I could only see the panel with the participant stats, and participant A has taken part in this and this and that, and B, etc. And I didn't see the results of the details of the research in any way. So you probably have to ask for it. And
it would never have occurred to me. Yeah, I'm sorry, it would never have occurred to me. I would have assumed that I wouldn't be allowed to, to go beyond my remit.
But
obviously
you can
see their responses. You just get that they're 60% completed.
Exactly.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, but I've never been offered even that. I'm
Oh.
lucky if I get an email saying, can you chase Mary B because she hasn't contributed? You know what I mean?
Okay.
I think it's important that we're more
Very
involved in that
important.
so we can
Yeah.
understand.
I always share the task list or the discussion guide with the recruiter, so she can see what tasks I'm asking these people to do, and whether you know, so she's part of, because it is quite a remote, distant thing. So if everybody can feel involved, then that's really nice thing.
It is, and that's never been my experience, and I would have welcomed it. I think it's a really good idea. And the other thing was just a little question. You talked about points, as points make prizes, and I wondered how they're administered. Is it automatic, or does somebody have to go through that? And
Yeah, absolutely. The system is you can, well, actually at the moment it's not fully automatic. I give them the points when I think the responses are satisfactory, but we could customize it as you know, being totally automatic. They take part and then they get 10 points or X points, which is the number of points for the activity. Yeah, so it can be totally customized. So it's a development thingy, really.
Great. And does anybody else have any other questions before we close this very interesting knowledge share? No?
Thank you.
Well, on your behalf and on behalf of the ICG, thank you very much, Natalie. It was really interesting. Hope you all enjoyed it. And
Thank you, Nathalie.
have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Well, ciao.